In the alternate universe featured in the Fox science fiction series Fringe, Secretary of Defense Walter Bishop's office features a large map of the United States. This map, upon closer examination, sports several differences with the geography of our United States. Last episode, we discussed the repercussions of Andrew Jackson never becoming president. These included the survival of the National Bank, the possibility of an alternate Native American policy, and a slower westward expansion of the American frontier. Today, I ask Mike Stevenson and Andrew Potts about the historical significance of the borders featured on the map. We'll begin with one of the most obvious differences. Texas is split into two states, North and South Texas. As stated in the last episode, it's possible that the US in the alternate universe might not have seen a Democrat elected until James K. Polk, who was president when the region was annexed.
I could see that from the foundation of Texas and its independence in 1836 and then becoming a state by 1845, slavery was an issue from the very beginning. In fact, that is directly why it rebelled against the Mexican government. I could see a scenario in the future where North Texas could become divided by something like the 3630 line that divided the rest of the country into slave and free zones. You also have a little bit of a difference in terrain, such that cash crop development in the South might have continued apace differently than it would have in the northern part of the state.
Another oddity found in this map is the existence of a state called Midland, which combines the states of Oklahoma and Kansas into one.
I guess that kind of goes back to the Andrew Jackson question. The reason why there aren't so many states is, well, probably because he never got elected president, or he never implemented the things they implemented, where they went over towards the west. Maybe they did, but not the same way that they did at this time.
For that to have happened, Oklahoma would have had to have probably been used differently than it was as a sort of like a reservation for natives. I don't think that, depending on how far back we're talking about Midland being formed, I'm not sure that that would have jived with federal native policy, or whether the white population would have accepted sharing a political entity in the same way.
I don't know if it exactly said that. There may be still a Native American population still remaining because they were never really relocated, or if they were not completely assimilated. If they're not clear on that, I would more or less assume that it was always that one state.
This seems to confirm our suspicion that, without Andrew Jackson having been president, the Indian Removal Act and Manifest Destiny might have been carried out differently, resulting in fewer states being formed. Similarly, North and South Dakota are combined into one state, Dakota.
Well, there's less congressmen, assuming that they continue with the traditional style of system that they have. Their flag would be very different, not 50 stars. It probably would look something like one of the original flag designs.
For me, I think that the division of North and South Dakota probably is very much like what the trend was in a lot of the states at the time. I think that for ease of administration, it was probably divided in the first place. If you have a scenario where you had a more centrally located state capital, that might have been really the only thing that I could think of that might matter.
Even more curious is the state of Washington, instead being named Southern British Columbia.
I could see that probably being an economic development more than anything else.
That's what the state was named after. It was named after George Washington, because he got both the capital and a state. I got a state and a day and a DC! There probably were already Canadian settlers there or something like that, and they just probably took the land and they just called it that.
One very inconspicuous difference is the absence of Michigan's Upper Peninsula on the map, meaning it possibly belongs to Canada. The historical background could harken back to the fight over the Toledo Strip, although on the map it appears to still be part of Ohio, meaning the exchange could go all the way back to the War of 1812.
Canada probably owned that land, or, well, probably the French, and they decided not to give it up during the Louisiana Purchase, I guess.
The War of 1812 particularly, there weren't very many U.S. forces in the Michigan area. There weren't that many British forces either in the area, and most of what was fought over was more so-called sea battles on the Great Lakes. But if the British had reinforced that area and felt a greater need to control the region, I don't think there would have been anything the U.S. could have done about it at that point. You look at the history of the War of 1812, particularly, Americans did very poorly going on the offensive especially in Canada. So I could almost see the British having an easier time.
The states of Alaska and Hawaii are also not featured on the map, and the flag seen in the news clip on the show points towards the possibility that the two regions never became states at all.
I can't really say for sure. Either we do own them as a territory, or else the Russians own a large part of land. And it could be very well possible that Russia owns some of Canada as well, because that's what Alaska belonged to. They belong to the Russians before it belonged to the U.S. And in the case, either Hawaii is still a territory or its own nation. So,
well, especially for Alaska, I think the treasure trove of valuable minerals that were discovered from gold through platinum to oil would have made Alaska a prize. And I can almost see a scenario where British Canada, the United States, and possibly even Russia might have fought for control of it later in history once it was discovered how many valuable resources were there. As far as Hawaii, it becoming a base for the development of the Pacific Fleet for the eastern part of the Pacific, I think it would have been valuable even if it had never become a state. Frankly, in the minds of many kind of nationalist Hawaiians, it never really should have been a state, because essentially it was a byproduct of American imperialism anyway. So I'm sure they would have been just as happy maybe.